Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 163, and we're going to talk about the myth of American military superiority. Uh, I know I said that I was going to try to do something more upbeat and positive, but I guess I failed. But I will try to end on a more positive note. So let's see how that goes. So, since tension in the Middle East is spiking because of the Israeli-Iran interaction. It kind of, as I observe the reaction here in the United States, I wonder, why are Americans so eager and fearless of going to war? It's almost like they are living in a myth, right? Like they believe the myth of US military superiority, that no one can go against the United States and win. Or, it might cost a lot. We might lose a lot of lives, but America will always be victorious at the end of it all. So I talked about the woke military in episode 35, and I did talk about the condition, the state of the US military in episode 42. But we're going to talk about basically US public opinion about the military. And I think that it leans generally towards it being superior, better than any other fighting force in the world. So, why is that? And is it even true? Some people might believe in the US military superiority because of the nuclear weapon arsenal, but that's a totally different topic. Because if we are going to be talking about nuclear weapons, then life as we know it is over. There's nothing really to talk about. But why is it so hard for people to see that this idea of US military superiority is extremely problematic? Maybe it's because they don't want to find out, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's similar to how our political system is so broken, but people refuse to acknowledge it or even see that there's a problem. I just don't know. But if you understand the tendency of government and the fact that it is extremely corrupt, and because of the corruption, that there's going to be a lot of misallocation of funding, then it's obvious that the military too will suffer from this kind of problem. If you see that the number of generals, right, the more generals there are in the military, then you know that there's going to be a lot of politicizing, right? People trying to justify their positions, try to increase their staff, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are in charge of certain projects, very lucrative projects, like say a weapon system, then you're going to try to pump that system up, even if there is very little actual battlefield benefit of it. You're going to pump it up. And sure, of course, we have the run of the mill, spread everything across the United States for the production of a single weapon system. That way, you have a lot of people in Congress on board to perpetuate the system even long after it has become obsolete. But anyway, so you have not only that, but you also have just a very slow, sluggish, ignoring of reality and what else is happening in the world, kind of state of mind. And so instead of being really flexible with the kinds of weapon systems that you are going to use to better equip all of the soldiers, you're just going to simply try to keep that cash cow alive, even though there is very little benefit for the fighting soldier. I'll give you an example. So we like to believe that we have an anti-missile system like the Patriot missile system that's been around for quite some time. I'm sure there have been some improvements in the system, but definitely not in terms of price. So they're very expensive. The United States does not produce a whole lot of them per month or per year. And so, what you have are, if you are going to fight against the United States, or you think that that's a possibility, then one of the things that you have to consider is, how do you defeat the Patriot missile system? Okay. And so, I'm just trying to get you to understand that just because you have a what you think is a superior weapon system, that everyone else is just not going to do anything about it. They're going, oh, they got a really great system. There's nothing we can do. Oh well, no. So if you realize that, say for example, a country in the Middle East, I don't know, on the western coast of the Mediterranean, heavily is dependent on the Patriot missile system, then you say, well, how do I defeat it? Well, uh, recently there was such an attack, and the first wave of the missiles were these very cheap, obsolete missiles, right? So they weren't going to do a whole lot anyway. There's no expectation that they would penetrate, the Iron Dome. But you send a lot of them, and apparently they sent like I don't know a ridiculous number of these obsolete missiles, and then what happens is that all of the ammunition, all of the missiles that were available for that type of protection, a lot of it was used up. Used up on shooting down these old previous generation missiles. And then you send in another wave of missiles, except now there's nothing to stop it. And my theory is that this was sent as a message: don't screw around. Like, we know how to defeat the system that you have. So it doesn't say that the system doesn't work, but there are ways to defeat it so that you have an edge. Keep in mind, the Patriot missile system is very expensive, and not a lot are, missiles themselves are produced per year. And most people are completely unaware of that aspect, production aspect, supply aspect of war. They just see the Patriot missile system and say, hey, cool. But they don't consider how many missiles that can be stopped and how many more you need to be able to resupply. Now, this is not an argument to say that we have to ramp up protection, because they're not going to cut costs either. So we're already in debt. So we have to think about alternatives. Not only is it the weapon systems that are problematic, but you look at just recent history. Uh, you can't make the argument that the United States won in Iraq, won in Libya, or in Somalia, right? These countries are not friendly to the United States, even after all of this expenditure of resources and human life. Those countries probably, I don't know, if you had a relative killed by uh, American forces, then you're not really, you don't have good feelings for the United States. Then there's Afghanistan. They told us we were winning for 20 years, and then all of a sudden we lost, right? So one could make the argument that the United States was losing for 20 years, and yet that war was perpetuated. And then in Iran, in 1980, there was a failed hostage rescue op. A lot of people died. I just remember I was still in high school when that hit the news, and I didn't really follow the story. I just know that a lot of people died and it was a failure. And I was kind of surprised, because I thought that, the United States had this really top-notch military. So why did it fail? And I bring that one up because recently, apparently, there was a secret covert operation with Israel and Blackwater, which is a private military uh, company that recruits from former military service people. Anyway, so it was a joint operation between those two entities, and their mission was to go into Yemen. This sort of primitive military, go in and destroy their missile launch sites or the missile stores or something like that, from which they were shooting at ships in the Persian Gulf. And so it was supposed to be straightforward, easy operation for this superior military force against this ragtag, low tech, inferior military operation in Yemen, the Houthis, right? Well, it turns out that their operation was revealed, right? Satellite imagery. They were visible. They were totally not secret. Russia told Iran, Iran told the Houthis, and they set up an ambush, and they were all killed. They were all killed. Completely. unnecessary loss of life. Yet you're not going to hear about it. I haven't heard anything. I did a Google search trying to find the story. I think it's being buried somewhere. Also, you can see that the military is a bureaucratic institution. It's run by government employees, and their incentive, their goal is not efficiency and doing the best they can. It's about getting as much as they can, milking that cash cow for as much as possible. You see the similar phenomena in other government bureaucracies like the TSA, Secret Service, okay, where I'm sure that there are people who are really, really good, skilled, trained, believes in the job, tries to do a top-notch job. But of course, that's them. It doesn't speak to the entire bureaucracy, which is filled with corrupt people. And so you have that, an ignoring of the problems within government and government bureaucracies. But then you also have Hollywood, where they're constantly pumping all this propaganda. You know, there was a brief period of time with movies like Platoon, where they tried to show the harsh aspect of life, particularly in Vietnam. But there's still some sort of hope at the end of those movies, right? Where there is a hero, where there is some higher sort of feel good lesson at the end of it all, whether it's camaraderie, brotherhood, loyalty. and and it's because who wants to watch a depressing movie, right? Not they're trashing all your values, and on top of it, they lost, right? And so who wants to go see that kind of movie? Uh, so information when it comes to the brutality and just the incompetence of various people, that's what the news is supposed to tell us, right? We're supposed to get that information from the news. They're supposed to tell us what's going on in the world. That's not entertainment. But of course, in a weird twist of um, you know events or weird twist of streams, the news has become entertainment, really, just propaganda. And films sometimes try to reveal really what's going on in battlefields, right? So we talked about um, The Covenant recently, and then there was another movie, Land of Bad, I think, with Russell Crowe. It's another really brutal film. Uh, I don't think it was based on anything real, but it's probably stuff like that, right? And so movies are now trying to show people, hey, this is not something you should be eagerly seeking out. This is not it, right? And so it seems like people are trying to live up to the movie portrayals that Hollywood is portraying, and which is just kind of really odd, right? So the reality is nothing anyone really would want if they really understood it, and yet that's what people want. And they're trying to, recreate or have that aspect of glory that seems to be portrayed in a lot of these pieces of entertainment. It's interesting, right, to say the least. Now, there is a lot of virtue signaling, a lot of people who talk about war, saying it's the right thing to do, the United States, because we're so big and powerful and so superior to everybody else. We should be the policemen of the world. We should beat up bullies like Russia who invade smaller countries. This kind of mentality is very, very strong. I get it. But the problem is that the real agenda is not victory, is not freedom, it's not whatever democracy people are thinking. That's not the goal. The goal of the war that is being fought is to increase the size of government. That's the goal, right? Increase the size of government, spend even more money. That's the goal. And so one might say that we didn't lose every war. The government won every war because they are larger at the end of the war than at the beginning of the war. So whether it's for glory of, fighting in battle and whatever. It just seems to be overblown, right? I don't think that that's worth it. In other words, I think that you can get glory, praise from people, respect from people without having to murder, destroy, blow things up, and screw people up in the head, especially when they come back. Why not have glory for making life better by uh, inventing things here, increasing the standard of living here in this country? Why not celebrate people who make TVs cheaper, computers cheaper, cell phones cheaper, modern plumbing, in-house toilets? Why not celebrate that kind of stuff? So it's not just that you have the entertainment industry uh, putting a positive spin on things like war, but there's a lot of negativity about innovation and progress. Um, Keep in mind that a lot of those feelings that people talk about, like We Were Soldiers, Mel Gibson movie, right, where you take out all the politics in the battlefield. All that matters is the guy next to you, and you try to all come home. Yeah, I get that, but you don't have to go to war to have that kind of brotherhood, that feeling of camaraderie and loyalty. Maybe it's different. I'm not saying it's the same, but I don't think that you necessarily have to ruin and then further empower the government. Uh, that's not the only way. In spite of the fact that it is very difficult to beat all this propaganda, positive war, negative on innovation, I think if people took more time to talk to other people, interact with other people, then this would happen less. But because we're so propagandized, we're so inundated with our own narrow subjectivities that we're not interested in the opinions of other people. I'm right. And so therefore, you are going to submit to what I believe is right. There's a movie I talk about every once in a while. It's called Joyeux Noël, which is Merry Christmas in French. Um, the beginning of the movie are all these little kids in all the different countries of Europe being taught to hate people in another country. Like these are subhuman. These aren't even human beings, and they're going to come and kill us if we don't go kill them first, right? So these are the things that little children are taught to say and believe. And so when the chance of war comes around, they all jump at it. This is my opportunity to kill those evil people. But then when you're actually on the battlefield, it's not fun to see all your friends and your family being killed, especially in World War One. It was so brutal. And then Christmas comes along, right? And they realize that they all have something in common, that they all celebrate Christmas, or like 90% of them celebrate Christmas, and they all start having mass together, singing together, eating together, playing together. And then the war, they have to go back to the war. And once they go back to the war, they don't want to kill each other any longer. And that's what I'm talking about. Like when you realize that the hate that you have for these other people is fake, it's just the result of propaganda, then maybe people would be less eager for war and more eager to figure out a peaceful solution to the conflict that's at hand. In other words, instead of looking for war, if we could look for justice, right? Why is this the problem? And chances are you'll find that it's some corrupt politician trying to do a favor for some corrupt corporation, right? Because not all corporations are corrupt and not all politicians are corrupt, but some easy way out instead of spending some extra money to be more competitive, or to realize that your company no longer is relevant. And so the products that you're making are obsolete and no one wants to buy it anymore. Accepting that reality instead of convincing some people in government to go to war against someone else, right? If we come to that awareness that justice can be found without war, then maybe we as a people, as a country, we can remember to celebrate progress, innovation, uh, prosperity, again instead of all of this stuff that we're seeing now. So hopefully that's a little bit more hopeful than what I usually do. I hope you have a great weekend. See you next week.